Dust boiled up behind the stagecoach wheels, a cloud trailing across the empty flats. The horses stamped to a halt before a sagging fence line, their flanks wet with sweat, nostrils blowing steam in the desert heat. The driver cracked his whip once more, but the man stepping down from the coach had already fixed his eyes on the ranch. Wind tugged at the brim of his hat. The place looked near abandoned. Roof shingles curled, corrals busted, gates hanging like broken teeth. Grass bent in brittle waves, hissing like snakes across the yard. The air carried the creak of a half-rotten windmill that turned slow and tired against the sky. Yet the house wasn't empty. 7 figures stood waiting on the porch. Black skirts stirred in the hot wind, shawls drawn close though the sun was merciless. Their faces, half-shadowed by bonnets, were not welcoming. Silent, still, like mourners carved from stone. The man froze at the bottom step. The weight of their eyes pressed against him harder than the desert heat ever could. One of them stepped forward, a gray-haired woman with lines deep as canyon cuts across her face. She carried something against her chest, wrapped in cloth. With a sudden motion, she pulled it free and thrust it toward him. A portrait. His portrait. The likeness stared back at him. Eyes set hard, jaw cut from the same stone he felt in his own reflection. The paint was faded but unmistakable. A second widow stepped forward. Another portrait, then another, and another. 7 in all, each woman holding the same face. His face. The man's breath caught sharp in his throat. His boots scraped the wood as he took a step back, the boards groaning under his weight. He shook his head slow, like trying to deny what his own eyes showed him. The widows did not move closer. They only watched, their silence heavier than any curse. Somewhere in the distance a crow split the stillness with a cackle. Then the sound fell dead again, leaving nothing but the whisper of dust and the steady, rasping breath of horses. The windmill moaned. The man opened his mouth, but words stumbled in his chest. His hand brushed the handle of the satchel slung across his body, as though searching for proof of who he was. Yet no proof would matter. Not against 7 widows standing in black, each clutching his painted likeness as though it were a gravestone. The gray-haired one spoke at last, her voice cracked and raw from years of grief. "We've been waiting on you." Her words dropped like lead across the porch. The others lowered their portraits to their sides, their gazes never breaking. The man stood there on the step, the ranch looming behind them, the desert stretching endless at his back. And though he had just arrived, he felt caught in something already begun, a snare drawn tight long before his boots touched this land. The lantern hissed as the flame caught, throwing long shadows against cracked plaster walls. 7 chairs scraped the floorboards, circling him where he sat stiff at the center table. The air smelled of dust, kerosene, and the faint copper tang of grief too long carried. A widow with dark hair gone brittle leaned forward first. Her hands shook as she placed the portrait flat on the table, the wood thumping beneath it. "My man rode out for water. Found him 2 days later in the mesquite, shot through the back. They left your face by his body." Another voice cut sharp before he could answer. A younger woman, veil still clutched in her fist. "They came at night. Took the horses, burned the barn. When I went to the ashes come morning, there it was, your likeness staring out of the soot." The man's jaw clenched. He gripped his hat brim until his knuckles blanched, but still he did not speak. The third widow rose, tall and straight though sorrow bent her eyes hollow. She slid her portrait across the table. The frame splintered where she'd gripped it too hard. "My husband begged him. He said he'd pay. They shot him while I was watching." Her voice broke low. "When the smoke cleared, I saw your face nailed to the post behind him." The others shifted, shawls whispering like restless wings. The gray-haired widow lifted her chin, voice rasping like gravel. 7 homes, 7 graves, and every time that picture, your picture, the silence that followed was worse than the telling. The portraits lay scattered across the table, his face staring back from every angle, painted and drawn by different hands, yet always the same. He swallowed hard, but the room seemed to close around him, the air thick as storm clouds. Shadows from the lantern licked across his features, and for a moment, even he could not tell if he was the man in the chair or the ghost in the portraits. "You think I'd done this?" His voice was low, hoarse from dust and disbelief. No one answered. The wind rattled the shutters. The house creaked, a long groan like old bones shifting. Then the youngest widow spoke, her words soft but sharp as a blade sliding from its sheath. "If it weren't you, then it's a devil wearing your face. And devils don't let a thing rest. He'll be coming here, same as he came for all of us." Her hand closed around the rifle propped by her chair. The man stared at the circle of widows, 7 sets of eyes fixed hard on him, 7 lives tied by grief and portraits that should never have been. The lantern sputtered once, and in the flicker it seemed their shadows grew taller than the walls, looming like judgment itself. The storm rolled in at dusk, black clouds dragging their bellies low across the hills. Lightning flared, and for an instant the ranch yard lit like noon. Broken fences, horses pacing restless, the widows' faces pale as bone against the dark. Inside, the fire snapped and spat. The man sat close, hat in his lap, while the portraits lay scattered across the table like a hand of cursed cards. The women watched him still, waiting for what he would say, but silence clung to him heavier than chains. A flash of light cracked through the window, and in its glare the scars along his forearm stood out, ridged like old canyon walls. One widow's eyes narrowed. "You carried iron once," she said. He didn't answer, only flexed the hand that had known the weight of a revolver too many times. Another leaned forward, whispering as though to herself. "I've seen that look before. A man who's put others in the ground." The fire popped, sparks spitting across the hearthstones. His eyes stayed on the flames, but his mind was elsewhere. Smoke rising from border towns, the taste of blood and powder in his mouth, the echo of men screaming in the dark. Ghosts pressed close, the kind that never left, each with a face he could half remember. The gray-haired widow spoke, steady as judgment. "You rode against their kind before. You cut them down, and they feared you for it. That's why they leave your likeness. So every woman knows who to curse when they bury their dead." His voice finally broke free, rough as gravel. "They weren't saints, the men. Outlaws. Thieves. Worse. I met him in fire and left him there." Silence followed, thicker than the storm outside. Then a younger widow spat into the dirt beside her boot. "Maybe so, but blood don't wash clean. We'd have brought this here to us." The walls shook as thunder rolled overhead. One of the horses screamed in the corral, hooves pounding against the rails. The man rose, his chair scraping back, his shadow thrown tall and twisted across the wall. His hand hovered near the satchel at his feet, where the old revolver lay wrapped in cloth. He hadn't touched it in years, but the weight of it pulled at him now, calling like an old sin. The gray-haired widow rose too, her eyes fixed past him, toward the storm outside. "They'll ride for this place before dawn. Mark me, the gang that finished our men aims to finish us next. And whether you brought him or not, you're the only soul here knows how to stand against him." The fire cracked again, casting their faces in red glow. 7 widows and 1 haunted man, shadows crowding the room like the dead come back to listen. Sunrise split the storm clouds in jagged streaks of red and gold. Hooves thundered in the canyon, a dozen riders kicking dust into the morning. Rifles glinted in their hands, bandanas snapping wild in the wind. The ranch yard was waiting. 7 widows stood spread along the porch and fence line, skirts whipping in the gale. Each held steel, shotguns, rifles, pistols passed down or pried from dead men. At the center stood the man, revolver heavy in his grip, eyes narrowed to slits against the glare. The first shots cracked. With splintered, glass burst from the windows. The widows didn't flinch. A rifle barked from the porch. One outlaw dropped, tumbling from his saddle into the dust. Another leaned hard in the stirrups, firing wild, but a second widow's shotgun roared and threw him backward in a spray of red. The man stepped into the yard, steady as stone. His revolver spoke twice, fast as lightning. 2 riders fell, horses screaming as they trampled the bodies. The outlaws circled, yelling curses, firing blind. Smoke rolled over the ranch, choking the dawn with black powder haze. Through the chaos, one widow broke forward, the quiet one, the one who'd hardly spoken. Her hands didn't shake as she raised a long rifle, eyes calm as the desert horizon. She fired once. The outlaw leader jerked in the saddle, clutching his chest, then toppled hard into the dirt. A hush tore through the gang. The man's revolver finished the rest, measured, merciless. The widows fought alongside him, every shot echoing like thunder across the flats. When the last rider fled, his shadow shrinking across the blazing plain, the ranch fell silent but for the groan of the windmill turning slow again. Smoke hung low. Horses stamped nervously in the corral. The ground was littered with bodies and brass, dust settling over both like a shroud. The widows lowered their weapons, hands trembling now that the roar had passed. The quiet one leaned her rifle against the porch rail, her face pale, but set with iron resolve. The man stood in the yard, chest heaving, revolver black with powder. His shadow stretched long across the dirt, falling over the dead and the living alike. The gray-haired widow's voice broke the silence, low and certain. Not just us widows now. We're something else. The others nodded, eyes burning with a fire that grief had not managed to kill. The man holstered his gun slow. Above him, the rising sun caught the edge of the ranch roof, turning the broken shingles to gold. And the old storyteller's voice lingers. Some say the widows kept that place, made it a haven where no outlaw dared ride again. And some say, on nights when the moon hangs low, you can still hear the shots and see 7 shadows standing tall against the dawn.